I remember the sound of paper more than the words. My mother was smoothing envelopes at the kitchen table, aligning edges the way she always did when she was nervous. My father stood near the counter, coffee cooling in his hand. I was home from school, backpack still on, thinking we were about to talk about course schedules or housing deposits. They didn't frame it as a decision. They framed it as an adjustment. The wedding costs got higher than expected, my father said, already halfway through his explanation. Just for now. My mother nodded, eyes still on the table. We'll replenish it later. You can always take out loans in the meantime. The fund had been discussed my whole life like a promise that didn't need repeating. Not a gift, not charity, just something solid underneath everything else. I waited for someone to say my name directly, to check if I understood, or if I agreed. No one did. I asked how much. They told me and then immediately told me why it made sense. My sister's wedding was only a few months away. Deposits were due. Guests had already booked flights. It would be embarrassing to scale things back now. Everyone was counting on us. You're practical. My mother added gently. You'll manage. I nodded, because I had learned early that nodding kept conversations moving. I told myself the same thing they were telling me. It was temporary. I was young. Loans were normal. This was what families did. What I didn't say, what I didn't fully understand yet, was that something had shifted. Not the money. The way decisions worked. After that, nothing dramatic happened. Which made it worse. I filled out loan forms between classes. I took the maximum allowed without asking questions. I learned which fees could be deferred and which couldn't. When friends talked about studying abroad or switching majors, I calculated interest instead. At family dinners, no one mentioned the fund. It became one of those topics that disappears not because it's resolved, but because it's inconvenient. My sister was radiant and busy and stressed in a way that invited protection. I didn't resent her. That surprised people when they asked. I didn't know how to explain that resentment needs acknowledgement to survive, and this had none. The wedding photos came later. I wasn't in many of them. I had finals that week. Years passed in uneven ways. I paid my loans on time. I didn't ask for help. Not because I was proud, because asking felt like misunderstanding the rules that had been clarified for me. I learned how to say no softly, to pick apartments based on what I could afford alone, to keep savings liquid, to build a life that didn't require backup. My family stayed warm if a little distant. Holidays were polite. Conversations skimmed surfaces. I noticed how often phrases like "we'll figure it out" or "something will work out" floated around without landing on anyone specific. Then came the call. It was my father, mid-morning on a weekday. He asked how work was going. He asked if I was still in the same place. He did not mention why he was calling until he did. There had been a business issue, a refinancing problem, something time-sensitive. They needed a short-term infusion to secure better terms. Just a bridge. Very reasonable. The bank needed assurance. "We thought you might be able to help," he said carefully. "You're stable now." I didn't answer right away. I looked around my apartment, the furniture I'd bought secondhand, the plants I'd kept alive for years. Stability had been expensive. Not just financially. They weren't asking emotionally. They were asking structurally. Like it was obvious where the weight should land. A meeting was set with their bank. I didn't suggest it. The banker did. It would help to have all stakeholders present, she said. Neutral and efficient. That was the first time anyone used a word that made things real. At the bank, the language changed. Numbers appeared on screens. Terms were printed and slid across the table. The banker asked direct questions and waited for answers. "Are you prepared to co-sign or provide capital?" she asked me. Everyone looked at me then. Expectant, but restrained. As if the answer was already understood and we were just formalizing it. I felt oddly calm. "I'm not," I said. There was a pause, not dramatic, just unfamiliar. The banker nodded once and adjusted her notes. "Then we'll need to explore alternative options." Outside, my mother asked if we could talk in the car. My father stared ahead while she turned toward me. "We just thought." She began, then stopped. After everything. I waited. You said before you'd manage, she said finally. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't list sacrifices or totals or years. I did, I said. And I am. She frowned, not in anger, but confusion. As if I'd changed the definition of something without informing her. But families help each other, she said. I nodded. They do, and sometimes they take out loans. No one spoke after that. They found another solution. Not an easy one, the terms were worse. Assets were sold. Plans tightened. Life adjusted the way it always does when it has to. Things between us cooled, not shattered. Just recalibrated. Calls became shorter. Visits less frequent. I was no longer the unspoken safety net. I was a separate entity. I felt grief in unexpected places. Not for the money, but for the version of family that only existed when I was flexible. What surprised me most was the quiet respect that followed months later. It came without apology, without acknowledgement, just a new tone. Fewer assumptions, clearer asks, I still love them. That didn't change. But love, I learned, doesn't require unlimited access. Sometimes it just requires the courage to give the same answer you were once given and mean it.